Laura and Bill show.
Bill could sing that. He's got a really good voice. As
But-
you can
but
all
I'm,
hear.
But I'm not going to sing it
No.
today. Okay, no, not going to happen.
Oh, you'll practice for next week, though?
No, I want to go practice for next week.
Oh, all right. How you doing, Greg?
Good.
That was cute.
Can I give my shout out to start the day?
I'll go shout.
Okay, first one is to one of the nicest people I know, and
I
I know
thought I
a lot
was
of
the
nice.
nicest
I know a
people.
lot of nice people, and I don't want the other ones to be offended. But this is Bonnie, who manages the resale depot on Wildwood Street. I see her when I'm in Starbucks in the morning, and she has got to be one of the nicest people I have ever met in my life. The next shout out is to one of the nicest guys I know, and that's Dick Schneider, who I don't see often enough, but who's a good friend of mine. And this is a shout out to him because he usually listens to the show as well on his way to morning mass or on his way home. I'm not sure which.
Thank you.
Anyway, shout out to those guys. All right.
There we
Is that
go.
all you've seen today so far?
Oh my God, no.
It doesn't take Bill long to see a lot of people.
Yeah, you go to
It takes
Star-
me
He's
a
a
while.
lawyer.
You go to Starbucks at 7:00 in the morning. You're apt to see
He's
a
a
whole
lawyer.
crowd of people.
But he just sits at Starbucks. So if anybody wants to see Bill,
Well, I'm
just
not
go
just
to Starbucks
sitting.
in the
I'm
morning.
returning emails and I'm working
Well,
for the
no, I
first
know,
hour
but
of the day.
it's
I mean,
not
don't
like
say I'm
he's
just
out
sitting there
glad
twiddling
handing,
my thumbs. Okay.
knocking on doors or anything like that.
Hard at work at Starbucks.
Right. Well, the first thing I would like to talk about is, there's grant money out there for first-time home buyers or someone who hasn't owned a home in 3 years. $3,000. That's the only qualification is you haven't owned a home in 3 years. That's it. So it started about January 4th. I'm getting my information from Tanya Neal of Mortgage One. So if anybody wants to call her to apply for this grant money, you can call her at 517-315-4626. That's a Jackson number, believe it or not. 315-4626. But it started with $15 million January 4th, and as of a month later, February 5th, it's down to 11.5.
11,500.
11 million,
Oh.
5.
Okay.
15 million to 11.5 million.
Well, I thought it was
In a month.
much lower than that.
But in a month, that's 4.5 million that's gone, or 3.5 million that's gone. Been used up already. So it's going fast at
Yeah.
that point.
Right, but since people
Oops.
don't necessarily write down the phone number, they can get the phone number at your website, which is
Well, you can call me at 7.
thinkingrealestate.com.
You're very
right?
good, Bill. You're getting good at this.
Right.
He should become a regular. What do you think?
Yeah.
I already thought I was.
I don't
You
want
are.
you to.
You
I
are.
switched chairs on you, so I don't want you to get in a comfort zone. Okay, so the money's going quickly. Let's call me and we'll find you a home. 780-3800.
I guess I thought we were down to just a couple million. Isn't that what we were talking about last week?
Well,
Was that a
a
different
couple
program?
million had already been spent.
Oh, okay.
In a month, though, you're talking 30 days.
All right.
3.5 million's already gone.
Okay.
So, anyhow.
Very good.
If anybody has any questions for us, 787-3397. 787-3397. Okay, Bill. What do you want to talk about?
No, this is your show, Laura. I'm just window dressing is all I am. So it's whatever you want to talk
Okay,
about.
well, the issue-
Any subject. What is
The
it?
issue I had this week on a property, hopefully we're closing tomorrow. House, the seller has either built the garage 6 feet onto the neighbor's property, over the property line, or 6 feet into the setback.
Well, there's a big difference.
Well, let's talk about what the difference is. So if it's on
This
or
is only
over,
a half-hour show.
well, you can
And you
summarize it,
chide
can't
me
you?
for monopolizing the conversation
Well, you can-
all too often.
Right. Well, you could always include
So which do you
other
want to
people.
deal with? Do you want to deal with a setback violation or do you want to deal with an encroachment?
I think.
Well,
Encroachment.
you told me it was an encroachment. Encroachment onto the adjoining
Well,
property.
when we first started dealing with it, we thought it was 6 feet over. We were told at one point it was 6 feet over the property line. Now, first of all, I said to the buyer, well, the building department at the municipality must have issued a permit to build that garage.
Well, no. If the garage was built 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, the records are probably lost or gone, or a permit was never lifted. I mean, when you're talking about a structure that's been in existence for decades, you're going to be very lucky to find any record of a permit. I don't know how the building department is in Jackson, but in most municipalities, they're just not going to have it. So you're
Well,
not
this
going to
isn't
find
in Jackson, but
and particularly if there was an encroachment. Now remember that if it's a violation of setback, if it was built 40 years ago, 50 years ago, I don't know when Jackson adopted its first zoning ordinance and established setbacks, but it's possible the structure was built before the setback existed. But that's a different issue from encroachment.
Why
Greg
wouldn't,
wants to talk about
Bill,
that.
why wouldn't they have it?
Records could have been lost. I mean, you think about record keeping
Yeah, but
30,
if
40, 50
It's
years
a garage,
ago.
nobody's gonna probably pull that. I mean, doesn't
you
that
mean
get
pull
filed?
nobody's
and-
going to pull a permit to do a garage? Is that what you mean, or
No,
nobody's
no, no,
going to
no.
pull?
I mean, for that garage, I mean, the garage is already done.
Garage was done, probably built
It's-
60 or 70 years ago, I think is
Well-
the example she's got.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't know exactly how old the garage is, but let's assume it was built in the 70s.
Yeah.
Well, then
First
there probably are
argument six.
records in the 70s. I mean, you'd have to go to the building department, but the building departments, look, you're trying to archive records for years and years
Yeah.
and years, and it's very difficult for municipalities. It's not their fault. It's a lot easier now with the digital age, but you know, some of those records you may have to go back and look on microfiche. They haven't even transferred them over to a digital format, and tracking those things down sometimes is next to impossible. So you're left with the circumstance today. If that garage has been there for 60 years, and the statute in Michigan is if it's been there for 15 years without the permission of the adjoining property owner, you've acquired title by adverse possession to at least the ground underlying that garage.
15 years.
15 years
Okay.
is the statute in Michigan for adverse possession.
What if you
Also
had
what's
the
called acquiescence.
What if you had the permission of the original owner of the neighbor's house? They sold. The new neighbor didn't realize the garage is on their property. You know, it goes on and on and on. The next person buys it and still nobody knows. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get sort of what you're saying, that it was originally permitted by some property owner back in the 1960s or the 50s or whenever, and the property's been conveyed 4 or 5 or 6 times since then, and nobody's bothered to say anything about it. That garage is going to stay there. It's been there so long, it's either there by adverse possession or acquiescence. And as a matter of fact, there's a principle in Michigan law that says even if I build a garage today and it encroaches on my neighbor's property, and I can show that it was an innocent mistake, that there was confusion regarding the boundary line, I built it, it was an innocent mistake, the law actually allows me to keep the garage there. The court will then determine the value of the land on which the garage sits, and the person who built the garage across the line, but as an innocent mistake, will pay the adjoining property owner whatever value is determined by the court. So there are any number of ways by which that garage will stay there. The difficulty that the purchaser of that property is going to have, whether it's an encroachment onto an adjoining property, whether it's an encroachment from the other property onto your buyer's property, or even if it's a violation of setback, somebody needs to do something about it to verify what's going on and who's entitled to it. And the title insurance company, with the exception of setback, because there's an exception with respect to the zoning ordinance, if it's an encroachment, the title company is not going to insure against that encroachment, whichever way
they
it
are
goes,
not, right.
unless you have a survey and you have one of two things, and the title company is going to require either affidavits from the property owners verifying that this has been in existence for X period of years, which exceeds 15 years, et cetera, meets all the requirements, or there's an agreement between the property owners, or there's a court order quieting title, called quiet title action, quieting title in the person who owns that garage and which encroaches onto the adjoining property. So there are any number of ways to solve it. None of them are all that easy, other than hopefully the neighbors can agree on what's going on.
So before the buyers close on this property, the seller should get an affidavit, or the seller.
You got to talk to the title company, but as I say, the title company may require a formal quiet title action. That's going to be expensive.
They're
Probably
just not,
nobody's
at
going
this
to do
point,
it.
the title company is not. simply not going to insure over
then
it.
the seller's gonna assume a risk that that garage, for whatever reason, is not entitled to exist as an encroachment, and there is a potential risk. Again, the risk is minimized the longer that that garage has been sitting.
Right. And they're willing to assume, they know all this,
As long as there's
and
full
they're willing
disclosure,
to accept that risk.
there you go.
Can't
And they've
get-
talked to the municipality, and the municipality seems to think there's not a problem.
Sure, and then if it ever turns out there is a problem and the garage is hacked off 6 feet, they just buy a smart car.
Well, it's a two-car garage, so
There
they
you
can have
go.
a
Now-
full-size car and a
Now we'll
smart
fit
car.
in that modified, decreased size garage.
So if you have to cut off the garage, do they have to cut it off within the setbacks, or can they violate the setbacks?
They could still violate the setback. Under that circumstance, they're still grandfathered in.
Oh,
That's,
okay.
that's not gonna be an issue.
So if it is 6 feet into the setback of 10 foot, which is kind of typical, I believe, for side yards.
Side yards are actually, it depends on the district, could
Right.
be as little as 5 feet.
Yeah.
I just don't know the district, but even if it encroaches into
I
the
think this one's
setback,
10.
I probably wouldn't worry about it. The longer that garage has been in existence, it's grandfathered in. There's probably not gonna be a problem with respect to setback. Again, if it's a new garage, maybe, you gotta go, then you pull a permit,
Yeah,
you
it's not
verify
new.
that there was a variance. If it's an old garage, most likely grandfathered in. By grandfathering, I mean that the garage was built before the zoning ordinance was changed to make the setback no longer conforming. That's known as a grandfather
Yeah,
use.
and in this particular area, I'm told all the the houses are kind of wrong. They're violating the property lines.
What's the setback?
I think the setback in this particular area is 10 feet.
What is
I
it?
have
What
not
is the
checked with-
setback?
What define?
Oh,
What is a
what
setback?
is it?
Setback is
It's
the
an
the
envelope.
distance between the property line and improvements on the property. And we require setbacks from the property line so that we have open space between houses. Otherwise, you end up with what's called zero lot line setback. You go to any municipality, we're all zero in Ann Arbor. Zero lot line setback. We have common walls. There's no space
Same
in
with
between.
downtown Jackson.
But when you get into residential areas in municipalities, you now have setbacks. Depending upon the zoning classification, the setback could be as little as 5 feet, could be actually as little as 3 feet in high density districts, or could be 50 feet. I mean, I've dealt with some projects in rural areas where the setback from agricultural operations,
That's from
et
the
cetera,
property line.
from the property line. I mean, I dealt with one up north where it was a 150-foot setback that we had to deal with
Wow.
Wow.
on a condominium project that was adjacent to an agricultural use, and the setback of 150 feet was intended so that nobody would complain about the agricultural use at a later date. And we had to go round and around with the municipality to get a variance with respect to that particular setback. Otherwise, our building envelope for this particular project was reduced to a postage stamp. But yeah, setbacks you have to be concerned about in any new construction. If you're buying an existing property that you're going to demo in whole or in part, and you're going to build a new place, grandfathering is gone. Although in many municipalities you might be able to stick within the existing foundation, you'd have to look at the ordinance. You may be able to stick within the foundation if less than a certain percentage of the building is demolished and rebuilt.
And then that's going to depend on the foundation, I'm finding out, because I have a great house for sale on North Thompson that has a pad for a garage, but the garage is not there. And if the only way that he can keep the pad or even build another garage on that pad is if the foundation has a rat wall. You know what a rat wall is?
No.
It's the concrete goes down into the ground so many feet to keep rats and rodents out of the garage. Now, if I leave my garage door open, I think they can still get in, but that was one of my new things I learned.
Whoopee.
Because we're dealing with that on one of our properties.
Rat wall?
Well, we have a garage that either needs total renovation or tear down and build a new one. And we have to look at the foundation. Whether we can keep the foundation there.
Setbacks, I mean, we have a cottage up north in northern
Right.
Michigan on the Great Lakes, and we're dealing with a setback which is imposed by the state, not just by the municipality, because it has jurisdiction over lands which comprise the bottomlands of the lakes, the Great Lakes, up to the high water mark, and the land adjacent, so that you don't have a detrimental impact on the lakes themselves. And all of these cottages were built back in really some of them before the turn of the century, before 1900, and they no longer fit the required municipal or state setbacks on the lakeside. And so there's a controversy over these properties where a new owner wants to come in, demolish a cottage which is really antiquated, no longer functional, it's functionally obsolete, and they want to tear down and build a new one, but they can't because of the setback requirements.
Can you build, and we've had this discussion before, but can you start building your exterior of your new home around the envelope of the existing one and then take it down from the inside out?
No, not around that. You're doing it.
Like-
The legal expression is backwards, but it's not quite exactly backwards. You're doing it backwards. What you do is you actually build it from the inside, and then you tear the outside out. In
okay.
other words, but you have to check with the municipality, because that has been used as a ruse, an impermissible, unlawful ruse by an owner of property who's actually done the construction on the inside, but because it violated the percentage allowed by the municipality, they were violating the ordinance with respect to new construction, even though they were within the existing foundation. Greg, you understand what I'm saying? In other
No.
words, they do their construction inside the existing structure, but right up to the existing walls. But they're now modernizing, they're making improvements, but the municipality doesn't always know exactly what's going on, because from the outside looking in, there's nothing happening.
Right.
Now they get it done, and they start, over a period of time, removing the exterior
lines.
shell, and they've got themselves a new cottage that doesn't meet the current requirements because they exceeded the percentage remodeling that they could have done under the former setback. It's a little confusing the way I just said that, but essentially you have to check with the municipality. The smartest thing you can do is, if you're buying something
I
and
mean,
you're going to improve
that,
it.
the new building would be within the setback limit.
No, a new building still would violate the setback.
Why?
Because the
It's
existing.
smaller than the existing building.
No, it's not small enough to meet the new setback requirement. It still violates the setback, and the percentage that they've done in improvement
Are you
exceeds
sure?
the limit.
Well, yeah. I think,
It would depend upon what that final structure looks like. And again, you got to look at the municipality's requirements, the different zoning ordinances.
well, I think the city of Jackson, I think Barry Hicks said this yesterday in a meeting I was in, if you do more than 70% improvement, you have to go by the new standards. So-
Right, and there are, again, you gotta look at the municipality. If you're buying a property and you're gonna make improvements, you gotta check to see what those
And
requirements
if you're gonna put up
are gonna
so
be.
back to the boundaries, if you're gonna put up a fence, you need a stake survey. What if they've got if it's a subdivision, which this is, can I take my metal detector and go find the stakes that are in the ground, signifying each lot, mark it with a stake, and then put my fence up?
That's a rhetorical question, right? The answer to that is
What if I
absolutely
get my
not.
neighbor's permission and say, okay, here's my metal detector, I find it, I'm staking it, I go to my neighbor and say, what do you think, is it okay?
Where's Tom Worth when I need him? Because I'll talk to any surveyor. You don't know whose stake is there. It's not necessarily the stake of the original proprietor of the plat. The original proprietor of the plat probably didn't put stakes in. They simply laid it out and recorded the plat. And the only reason there's a stake there is because somebody somewhere along the line in the last 60 or 70 years had a survey done, and the surveyor put a stake down. That doesn't mean it's the accurate corner for the lot. If you're going to put a fence down, you either get your neighbor's consent so that you don't end up in a dispute later, you get it in writing so that there's no issue.
And do you
Or-
record that?
You can. I'd want to make certain that my neighbor and I both agree on where this fence is going, and understand that agreement may not be binding in the future. But more importantly, have a stake survey done, not a mortgage inspection report, stake survey, use that. Stay
Okay.
inside it, by the way.
Couple of houses I just want to bring attention to, 1511 Francis, 1713 Francis, both of those are 24.9. One's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, all brand new on the inside. One's a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, great backyard. And 202 Southwest Avenue, 44.9, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath. Great neighbors on that one. Because I own the property. We own
There
the
you go.
property across the street.
ThinkingRealestate.com.
Oh, and I got a neighborhood